This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
World leaders speak at special UN meeting on COVID-19. Ethiopia's special federal police forces start operating in Tigray's capital. And campaigns in Ghana heat up ahead of December 7th polls. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest from business is Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up to you in the course of the hour. South Africa's manufacturing sector is losing its growth momentum. We'll look at the latest data. And South Sudan has gotten a bailout from the International Monetary Fund. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thank you, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. We begin with coverage on the coronavirus pandemic. Johns Hopkins University says the world's case count stands at 65.3 million. 1.5 million people are reported to have died. These staggering numbers come as world leaders meet virtually for day 2 of a special session at the UN to address the crisis. At the General Assembly in New York, UN Chief Antonio Guterres said the pandemic had created long-term problems.
A vaccine cannot undo damage that will stretch across years, even decades to come. Extreme poverty is rising. The threat of famine looms. We face the biggest global recession in 8 decades, and these intergenerational impacts are not due to COVID-19 alone. They are the result of long-term fragilities, inequalities, and injustices that have been exposed by the pandemic.
The UN Secretary General also criticized several countries, without mentioning names, for ignoring scientific guidance from the WHO. The UN said the special session is a chance to make sure that vulnerable communities got access to vaccines. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi stressed the need for equal access.
The Phase 3 trials of China's coronavirus vaccines are at full speed. Once they are completed, we'll move on to production and distribution immediately. China treated the vaccine as a product for public health. We'll prioritize the distribution to developing countries as one of China's contributions to a shared future of health for mankind.
The coronavirus pandemic is reported to have claimed more than 1.5 million lives. As many countries grapple with concerns over a second wave of infections, COVID-19 vaccines continue to offer hope for some. The UK became the first Western country to authorize a vaccine. It's set to start an immunization drive by next week. Getting hold of future COVID-19 vaccines remains a challenge for Africa. However, the Africa CDC says it aims to have 60% of Africans vaccinated against COVID-19 within the next 2 to 3 years. Earlier, we spoke to Dr. John Nkirasong, the director for the Africa CDC. He touched on the challenges the continent was facing.
The question of delivery of the vaccine becomes another issue, where we as a continent now have to face some realities there. And there are 2 issues that we have to look at. The first is how do we procure these vaccines? How do we buy these vaccines? And as you know, we have developed a strategy for the continent, which we call the whole of Africa strategy to access vaccines in a timely, fair, and equitable manner. And that strategy was endorsed by the Bureau of the Head of States on August 20th. So it's important that we explain this with clarity so that the entire continent understands that we are working night and day to ensure that Africa is not left behind. Then the second part of that is that we have to begin to look at delivery systems of the vaccines. If you recall, the Pfizer vaccine that has been approved in the United States, the UK, require an extensive cold chain of about minus 70 degrees Celsius. The way you understand this is that the ice cream that you and I eat is usually stored at minus 20, so it's as hard as rock. But we require something that is 3 times colder than that in order to store the vaccine, transport it across the continent. And if you know the climatic conditions on the continent, I mean, the high temperatures of at times 40 degrees Celsius, that begins to tell you the challenges that we may have with this vaccine. However, what we at Africa CDC is doing is that we're providing a roadmap on how to deliver these vaccines. We're working very closely with the World Health Organizations and other partners like the UNICEF to provide a roadmap on how to deliver these vaccines given the conditions that they are.
So where does the world stand on rolling out a vaccine against the coronavirus? Let's take a look.
The first batch of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has arrived in the UK. It's expected to be rolled out next week. The US top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci earlier criticized the UK for its hasty approval, but later apologized. Canada could also approve the vaccine within the next week. But Pfizer has slashed its 2020 production target from 100 million to 50 million doses. It cites supply chain challenges as the reason. Another promising vaccine is one developed by US drug maker Moderna. It's asking American and European authorities for emergency approval. The first batch could be available in the US by year's end. Moderna expects to offer between 100 million and 125 million doses available globally in the first quarter of 2021. Russia is the first country in the world to approve coronavirus vaccines, but its 2 vaccines were registered before final stage trials were completed. On Wednesday, officials said more than 2 million doses of the Sputnik V vaccine will be available within the next few days. Meanwhile, 5 Chinese vaccines are undergoing final stage clinical trials in over 10 countries. Chinese firm Sinovac is cooperating with the Brazilian state of Sao Paulo on the CoronaVac vaccine. The state has received over 1 million doses. Sinovac is expected to publish efficacy results by December 15th. Li Jingyi, CGTN.
In Uganda, public health officials are warning of more new COVID-19 cases during the holiday season. In the meantime, the country's health ministry says it recorded about 2,000 new cases weekly over the past month. CGTN's Isabel Nakira reports.
Paul Alitier is campaigning to have a COVID-19 free community. He lives in Kisenyi, an informal settlement in Kampala, where it's hard to maintain self-distancing due to overcrowding. But he says teaching people about the dangers of the virus is key. He's now advising young people here to stay in Kampala during the festive season to protect vulnerable and elderly people in the villages.
We would love to see people stay put. Let's have a scientific festive season. We have phones. We can send our loved ones money to buy meat instead of traveling to villages and spreading the infection.
But not everyone in Paul's community is following his advice.
The world can't just come to a stop because of COVID-19. The lockdown was already lifted and we started work. We can't stop. We shall go and celebrate.
Traditionally, many Ugandans spend time with family in the countryside during Christmas and New Year. Public health officials in Uganda have warned that cases could get out of control due to large celebrations and travel. The government recently eased restrictions by allowing gatherings of up to 200 people, but maintained a curfew and the closure of pubs. COVID-19 treatment centers in Uganda are already overstretched and are running out of hospital beds. Patients with a less severe form of the disease are being asked to seek home care, while many reach hospital when it's too late. The health ministry says the number of hospitalizations is high and people should take individual responsibility during this festive season.
During this time, we cannot overemphasize. People are indisciplined. People have actually forgotten about their lives. People have forgotten about their health. They have forgotten that life takes priority. Instead of protecting yourself, instead of taking precaution.
The government is warning of widespread community infection with around 2,000 cases reported weekly. The capital, Kampala, is reporting the largest number of COVID-19 infections. The government says it can't rule out another lockdown in towns with high cases if things get out of hand.
In the past 1 month, we have witnessed patients with severe forms of the disease, and this is accompanied with more deaths. We've seen more people dying every other day, most especially the vulnerable population, like the elderly population, people 60 years and above. We've seen people who've got core medical conditions.
Uganda's main referral hospital in Kampala has only 27 intensive care unit beds. The government says it's expanding its capacity in upcountry hospitals to take in the increasing numbers and also training health workers to handle severe cases. It's also built a new oxygen plant to boost the capacity of its ICU units in the capital. The community of Kisenyi is considered vulnerable due to the congestion in the settlement. Paul says he will continue educating people in this settlement about the importance of keeping safe from COVID-19, despite many being reluctant to change their ways. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's now turn to Ethiopia, where special federal police forces are now operating in Tigray's capital, Mekelle. The city is still seeing some protests from the civilian population. The spokesperson for Ethiopia's foreign ministry outlined the federal police's mission in Mekelle.
The federal police force has already been dispatched and is in position inside Mekelle city. Now they are already in a physical operation, and I can announce that the military operation is over. On the other hand, civilians have started dialogue with the army and police, and it looks like everyday life seems to be returning to normalcy slowly. The police mainly is there to apprehend the people needed for them to face justice. At the same time, whatever damage done by those inside the city of Mekelle shall be investigated and will be revealed.
Well, CGTN's Giram Chala is in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, and joins us now with the very latest. Giram, thank you so much for joining us. What more can you tell us about the operation underway in the Tigray region?
On a few days after the capital city of the Tigray regional state, which was also the last stronghold of the TPLF leadership, fell in the hands of the National Defense Force. Now we have heard, you've heard from the spokesperson there, that the special federal police force are now taking over that city. Most of the locations in that city are now under physical surveillance and also other jobs to guarantee security in that city. Earlier today, we have heard of a bit of protest in that city, and the federal force are also trying to quell that down. So most of the work that is being done at the moment by the federal force who are on the ground, and a few hours ago what we have heard is that they're trying to, first of all, disarm those people who are still armed. They're also trying to find any military operations that are happening inside the city in terms of holding lots of guns under one location, or even people trying to sabotage the federal force themselves. So the police is doing a lot of job, but the most important job, Hannah, according to the Prime Minister as well, is they are going to bring those people behind this conflict into justice. They are searching door to door at the moment. That's what we are hearing, working alongside the people of Tigray, the residents of Mekelle city as well. So the operation is ongoing until job is done. But the most important news, on the other hand, that we have heard today is that TPLF leadership once again is asking the federal government to calm down and start negotiations so that this conflict can also be resolved peacefully, although the government claims that the war is over and hunting has begun.
Giram, there are reports that humanitarian relief in the region was challenging because aid workers still did not have unimpeded access. What is the situation there now?
Well, as it was feared, the humanitarian situation remains to be alarming at the moment, although conflict has subsided. And as the government says, there are no active military operations at the moment inside Tigray regional state, and it has controlled almost all of the regions in the Tigray regional state. So the humanitarian situation, according to the United Nations, remains to be dire, and it is unable to provide the necessary amenities for those people who have been affected, especially for the IDPs, the internally displaced people inside the Tigray regional state. Unfortunately, this is after both the UN and the government have announced that they have signed an agreement to open safe humanitarian corridor for the people to access any kind of necessities through the United Nations relief services. So the complaint remains to be there, but some of the officials we spoke to today are saying that the government is also working 24/7 to provide the necessary shelter, protection, as well as food and health services for the people affected. And they are saying that they are also trying to return those people out of the border in Sudan to come back to their locality. So the government's effort is one thing because they say that this is our priority, but the UN remains to be complaining that the agreement is not being implemented on the ground and access to human services should be opened as soon as possible. So maybe in the next 1 or 2 days, we should be hearing a better news than this one for the people affected by this conflict.
Thank you so much, Guillaume, for that very comprehensive update. Guillaume Chala joining us live from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Well, let's now turn to Mali. The UK government has started deploying 300 troops to that country. The troops will take part in a 3-year deployment. They will join the UN mission in Mali. The UN peacekeeping operation there is considered the most dangerous mission. The country has been fighting against terror since 2013. The British troops will be stationed in Gao, a region in northeastern Mali.
It's different in that it's a peacekeeping role, which the UK has done before, but very rarely involved in any part of West Africa. You have to go back 20 years, really, to see British military action. That was in Sierra Leone in 2000. And it's different from the military expeditions, for example, into Afghanistan, where they were involved in a combat role. This is very clearly a peacekeeping role, but in a very dangerous area. It's part of UN MINUSMA, which is one of the biggest peacekeeping operations currently underway around the world, and is considered the most dangerous peacekeeping operation underway around the world. About 14,000 UN troops deployed around the central areas of Mali. The British troops are going to join that, and they're going to be involved in mostly reconnaissance roles and protection of political figures and so on. They are involved in West Africa to an extent with training. There are British troops currently involved in training in Nigeria and also in Senegal. But this is all plays into a concern that West Africa is gradually becoming this center of Islamic insurgency.
Well, let's now take a short break and return. Election campaigns in Ghana heat up ahead of December 7th polls. And South Africa announces locust outbreak in parts of the country.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Political campaigns in Ghana have gone a notch higher as the country prepares to head to the polls on December the 7th. President Akufo-Addo is seeking re-election and faces former President John Dramani Mahama. While Ghana is believed to be a leading example of democracy within West Africa, it still grapples with issues that affect confidence and participation in the electoral process. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai reports from Accra.
Political parties are ramping up their campaigns ahead of the crucial general elections. 12 candidates are contesting for the presidency. But Ghana's elections have always been a two-horse race between the New Patriotic Party and the National Democratic Congress. The incumbent, Nana Akufo-Addo of the NPP, will take on former President John Dramani Mahama of the NDC for the third time.
Looking at
the policies that have been implemented by the government, we are so convinced that majority of the people will once again vote for the president. Mind you, one very policy that has been successful has been the free senior high school program that has endeared the heart of many.
We are very confident that a genuine vote will have only one verdict: John Mahama back to Flagstaff House. We are very clear in our minds about that. And it's obvious that the government is very nervous.
More than 17 million people are expected to vote in this year's elections, out of which more than 2.6 million are first-time voters. Experts say the state of the economy and how the government has handled the coronavirus pandemic will be the key issues likely to decide the outcome of the election. Education is also an important issue in the minds of many voters.
The promises on education from both parties, that's it for me. Being that I think as a country, we need to be educated. When you're educated, you're well informed. When you're well informed, you make decisions based on the information you have from the things you have learned. And I also love the job opportunities that they're going to create, both parties. So I'm just going to watch the ones that are going to be more feasible, that can be well administered, then vote according to that.
What will inform my decision to either maintain or vote against will be the policies on education as a student as well, policies on job creation, because after school I need to get employed.
This year's election preparations have, however, suffered setbacks due to the pandemic. Large rallies were banned during the lockdown to prevent infections spreading.
But Ghana is forging ahead to hold the elections despite the pandemic. The Electoral Commission says it will enforce all safety measures, including strict wearing of face masks and social distancing at the polling stations.
Ghana's elections have largely been carried out in a peaceful and credible manner, but the opposition party, NDC, is this time accusing the Electoral Commission of attempts to rig the election in favor of the ruling party, NPP.
We don't trust the EC. They have not given us cause to trust them. So we are taking our own referee into the ring.
But the Electoral Commission has rejected the allegations and says it will ensure a free and fair election. Some experts say the outcome of the presidential election is difficult to predict.
We've had a pandemic which has affected the way the candidates have campaigned. So if you put these two together, it puts an already unpredictable election in further flux or in further volatility. I think that if there has been any time that there's been a lot of uncertainty about the outcome of an election, it is now.
Ghana is seen as a shining star of democracy within the West Africa sub-region, which has witnessed coups and violence during some past elections. But it also has had to deal with making the electoral process more transparent and appealing to the masses. In the 2016 elections, voter turnout was estimated at 69.2%. The Electoral Commission hopes more voters will cast their ballots on polling day. The government has made the election day, December 7, a public holiday, something that's not been done in previous general elections. It's likely many people may turn up to vote this time round. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
The Southern African Development Community has appealed for $22 million to fend off invasions by the African migratory locust. Here's CGTN's Farai Mokatuya with more details.
Zimbabwe experienced invasions by the African migratory locusts in June and October, and although the situation has been brought under control, the country remains on high alert. 6 other nations, namely Angola, Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa and Zambia, are under threat from the voracious pests.
So the countries are still trying to address the impact of the cyclones, Idai, the climate change, and now we are having the locusts. So this is really, this will really have an impact not only on the planting season, because as you know, this is a time where the farmers are supposed to start planting, but if in those areas you have the locusts, this is not really good. It's really difficult to say for the time being how the spread could be, or how it could be the level of the consequences, but what we can say is that what we are doing now is really to work hard, at least to reduce the impact of locusts on the crops and also on the food security.
Since January, the Food and Agriculture Organization has mobilized $2.5 million for the response and now plans to scale up assistance to prepare countries at risk to meet the threat.
We are working very closely with the different governments, the different countries, in terms of surveillance, at least to assess the spread and the situation of the locust in different countries. And so the assessment really helps us to see how we can address the issues, what the level of the response that is needed in those different countries. At the same time, we have also been working with the SADC Secretariat to mobilize resources, because as for the time being, the budget that were published by the SADC is about 20 to 22 million of US dollars to start responding to the crisis.
Beyond providing pesticides, this response will also strengthen the institutional capacity of government departments as well as extension and support services to ensure they can deal with any future invasions as well as other challenges that are affecting food production and security in the region. Farang Wakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Agriculture Minister Toko Didiza says the country is experiencing locust invasions in some areas. Areas affected include Free State, Northern Cape and Western Cape regions. CGTN's Angela Coppola reports.
According to the department, strong winds are aiding the quick spread of the swarms. In this case, it's the brown locust, which is endemic to South Africa, that's causing the problems. It's not the African migratory locust that has caused widespread devastation of crops in SADC countries. Now efforts to stop the spread of the swarms are underway, with the National Agricultural Department sending specialists into affected areas to work with local departments and farmers. Didiza has also called on the public and farmers to report any swarms that they spot, so that teams can be deployed to destroy those pests. The Food and Agricultural Organization says that the South African outbreak started in the Eastern Cape. It doesn't come at a good time, of course, as the country is about to go into its planting season for certain local crops. The issue is not just the locusts attacking maize and other cereal crops, though. They also eat the equivalent of their own body weight every day. They also eat grass, and that will affect livestock, as it will destroy their pasture. These are trying times for farmers who have had a bumper harvest this year after a drought the year before. If that's not enough, though, looking ahead, the experts warn that there's a likelihood that the country could experience La Nina weather patterns, which will lead to locusts multiplying even faster. So the farming community are keeping a close watch on those swarms and the weather. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The World Health Organization says Nigeria is among 103 countries facing huge disruptions to family planning and contraception services due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The WHO warns this could lead to millions of unplanned pregnancies in Africa's most populous nation. From Abuja, correspondent Phil Haza now explores what some healthcare charities are doing to address the situation.
32-year-old Miriam Salisu is pregnant with her 10th child. She's lost 3 of her children, 2 of her daughters are married, and her 4 boys are still at home. She says she and her husband have decided this baby will be their last.
I think I want to rest now because it's not been easy taking care of these children. Even to take them to school has been impossible. I don't want to put my body through the rigors of giving birth anymore. We will rather take care of the ones we have to the best of our ability.
According to Nigeria's National Demographic Health Survey, over 30% of young women in the country have no access to maternal health and family planning services. Months of lockdowns and the transfer of resources to combat COVID-19 have compounded the problem.
Many poor people in rural areas who have suffered from the disruption of maternal health and family planning services like this are posed with the challenge of bearing more children than they can cater for.
Despite the challenge of COVID-19, this non-governmental organization, Wellbeing Foundation Africa, is providing these services to Miriam and other women in this community on the outskirts of Abuja. They're also giving them education on family planning and contraception. The United Nations warns that the disruption of these services could result in more than 7 million unintended pregnancies worldwide in 2020.
We're able to convince them on the importance of the uptake of family services, and we even give it to them centrally, where they can have maybe commodities like condom, that they can use. If you can hear from the in charge here, you see that the percentage of people assessing family planning has now increased, unlike before.
However, experts say these programs are urgently needed in communities that are harder to reach.
The road is not good. You have poor network, telecommunication network. At times you want to communicate with them, you can't get through. 2, funding is another problem. You don't have support. Partnership, that's another key area that federal governments have to look into, or other NGOs, international NGOs have to look into. If you want to reach out to people that really need the uptake of these services, then you have to extend your tentacle into the rural area.
Nigeria's Ministry of Health says despite the negative impact that the pandemic has had on the country's health sector, it's working hard to allocate more resources to family planning services. For now, women like Miriam are relying on the efforts of NGOs for vital family planning services. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, I'll be standing by with more news, including what's happening in the world of sport. But now let's take a look at what's happening in business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. South Africa's manufacturing sector is losing its growth momentum. We'll have the data. And South Sudan has bagged its first bailout from the IMF. The details are coming up next.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Let's start with some macro data. The South African ABSA Purchasing Managers Index declined to 52.6 points in the month of November from the solid 60.9 points reading recorded in the month of October. That drop essentially suggests that the manufacturing sector's recovery is losing steam. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with a dive into the data.
The decline comes after 3 consecutive upward moves and brings the index to the lowest level since July.
We've seen an improvement in Q2 and Q3 almost across the board, and also the Q3 figures almost back to where we were last year. It's about 2.5% down. But taking into account that last year was also not a bumper year for manufacturing, it was a pretty dismal year. It's not necessarily, saying that they are out of the woods.
It's more around the easing of the production trends in terms of decline. Just recently, the latest figures released in September, even October, show that there's an easing in terms of decline from the large decline which we experienced of negative 25%.
The manufacturing sector is diverse, with uneven recovery in the motor vehicles and metal sectors compared to food manufacturing.
It's more or less what we expected. A lot of people spending money on groceries and so on whilst they've been staying at home. And that trend is still continuing a little bit in the last 2 quarters of this year.
There were some sectors that rebounded very quickly to the pandemic. Construction building materials sales during the height of the lockdown in April were just 1 billion rand.
Now, you're talking about the figures of just above 10 billion in terms of monthly sales with regard to the construction material. So that's showing that there's some improvement in terms of the trend with regard to the demand in the sector.
The sales volumes in the metals sector have also rebounded since April.
We've seen a dip of 18 billion in April. Moving now into September, the figure is now almost close to 46 billion in terms of sales. So some element of encouragement.
The made-for-export motor vehicle industry remains under pressure, especially to the United Kingdom.
That's a concern to me because I think the UK economy will probably come out of this looking worse than we do in terms of the size of the contraction. Having gone into a second severe, very hard lockdown now.
The immediate future for the manufacturing sector doesn't look that bright, and it's going to probably take between 2 and 3 years before everybody's back up to speed again. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Onto the continent's youngest economy, South Sudan has secured $52 million from the International Monetary Fund to address its urgent balance of payments needs. This is the country's first loan since it joined the Washington-based lender back in 2012. South Sudan's economy is forecast to contract by at least 3.6% in the fiscal year that's ending in June 2021. That's about 10 percentage points below its pre-pandemic baseline. From Juba, here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet.
South Sudan's finance ministry says the $52.3 million loan is the country's first from International Monetary Fund since joining the financial institution in 2012. For half a year, civil servants in South Sudan have not received their salaries. The government says part of the loan from the IMF will be used to pay those arrears. But despite the loan, it is asking for more financial support from international donors.
We acknowledge that these efforts by the government are inadequate to address the stark challenges facing us today. Government cannot do it alone. All the stakeholders must come together to contribute and collaborate to tackle the issues.
The IMF says it approved the loan known as Rapid Credit Facility to mitigate challenges caused by the coronavirus pandemic in South Sudan. Flooding in parts of the country, locust invasion, and a fall in global oil prices have exacerbated South Sudan's economic situation. The IMF says it granted South Sudan the loan after the country's central bank implemented IMF's recommendations to record all oil exports and transactions under the Transitional Financial Agreement. The Bank of South Sudan says the loan is only a short-term solution to the country's economic challenges.
The main problem of our economy is issue of production. And of course, that's long-term. It's medium to long-term. We need to be producing, because if you don't produce, really, it's very difficult for you to stop inflation, especially if we take South Sudan as a small open economy like us, depending mostly on importing so many things.
South Sudan's government says the economy is projected to contract by 3.6% in the financial year 2020-2021 due to the pandemic and effects of years of conflict. The United Nations says it is concerned that the poor economic performance will set back the implementation of the country's 2018 peace deal.
The government's capacity to deliver peace dividends that may indeed put at risk the revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. And this is of enormous concern to all of us as your partners.
In August, President Salva Kiir formed an economic crisis management committee to try and come up with a way out of the current economic challenges. But inflation is continuing to rise and prices of basic goods are now beyond the reach of many. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
On to North Africa now. Authorities in Tunisia are looking to boost e-commerce and reduce the use of cash. The North African economy is seeking to have over 300,000 retailers join the electronics payments system. Now, the value of e-commerce transactions in Tunisia rose to $18 million in 2019. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Chouachi.
Tunisian Ministry of Commerce officials have said they are embarking on plans to digitize commercial transactions and limit the use of cash. The e-commerce department says the ministry recorded 5.3 million transactions in the first 9 months of 2020. This number increased by 87% compared to the same period in 2019. The value of e-commerce transactions for both administrative services and goods reached 270 million dinars, which is around $100 million.
There's a new dynamic in the e-commerce sector since the pandemic and the health confinement.
There are also too many offers on the websites and social networks. Cash on delivery is still widespread, but we aim to decash up to 90% of these operations. The state is boosting digitization and e-payment. So we are also offering the export facilitation platform Easy Export to promote exports by SMEs.
The African e-commerce giant Jumia is the leading mainstream e-commerce player in Tunisia. The company has offered new services since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in a bid to facilitate transactions and to decash payment operations.
The e-commerce in Tunisia and in Africa in general has a lot of challenges also, mainly the logistics challenge and the payment challenge. The payment challenge mainly because our economy is still very, very cash driven. So basically in Jumia we have a big percentage of our payment going through cash. But fortunately we launched Jumia Pay in March 2020 and we have more and more customers paying with credit cards and with electronic payment methods.
In the month of November, over 10 million people visited Jumia website to take advantage of the exceptional offers during the 3 weeks of Black Fridays. Recent statistics show that the company's customers live in all regions across the country.
Jumia Tunisia is now working since more than 5 years. We grew our number of employees to serve our customers from few people to nearly 200 people. And our customers on the other side are coming from all backgrounds. Most of them are young, but you have also family, a lot of households. People are purchasing products from a different range of categories, from electronics to groceries.
According to the Minister of Commerce, Tunisia aims to boost exports by offering incentives to thousands of exporting companies and businesses. The government will also support the retailers and private sector operators that will invest in e-commerce and offer electronic payment services. Experts assert that the growth of e-commerce in Tunisia will significantly depend on the quality and efficiency of logistics networks. Authorities in Tunis, as well as private e-tailers like Jumia, seek to boost e-commerce and to curb the use of cash. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Onto the world of oil. OPEC and a group of allied countries, including Russia, have agreed to increase oil output by 500,000 barrels a day from January. The group also agreed to meet monthly thereafter to decide whether or not to further adjust outputs depending on global economic conditions. Now, that decision followed days of wrangling among the oil-producing countries of whether or not to increase output early next year after the pandemic sapped demand for energy this year and really muddled the outlook for the industry as a whole. OPEC members and their allies had made pretty deep cuts to production last year in order to support prices as the pandemic sharply reduced demand for fuel.
All sides have confirmed their commitment to the declaration of cooperation and have stated and confirmed that 2 million barrels per day of production at some point need to return to the market, although it is clear, and this has also been confirmed outside, that the pace of this return should be determined by the state of the market.
We could tweak upward, we could tweak downward, and we could stay put. And it is all about addressing uncertainty. If you have an uncertain situation, you need to be attentive.
The EU Chief Charles Michel is urging members of the bloc to remain united behind Brussels negotiators in post-Brexit trade talks. That comes after France threatened to veto any deal that gives ground to London. Michel congratulated the EU negotiator Michel Barnier on keeping member states appraised of his progress in talks with the UK. The United Kingdom, as you might recall, left the European Union on the 31st of January, and its post-Brexit transition period continues until the end of this month, when it will formally leave the EU single market. Barnier is engaged in intense talks with in London with his UK counterpart David Frost on a trade deal to govern cross-channel business ties from 2021 onwards. But European officials fear that if an accord isn't found within days, there will be absolutely no time for member states or the European Parliament to ratify it. I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back with more news at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be heading over to South Africa. The country plans to sell a stake in its national airline. The idea here is to raise about $400 million for its turnaround plans. But Who will buy into SAA and under what terms and conditions? We'll have some details for you at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to
That's been a big story, one that we want to find the details of. Thank you so much for that, Rama. We'll see you back later at the top of the hour. Let's now take a short break when we return. We look at how Uganda's uncles are looking out for youth in that country.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
We go to Uganda now, where a group of social workers locally known as street uncles are transforming the lives of young people living in slums. They're former addicts who are now inspiring young people to live a life free of drugs. CGTN's Hilaria Yesiga reports.
A former street child born in Kisenyi, one of the poorest communities in Uganda's capital, Kampala. Marco Wori is using his life experience to help the young people here give up on drug addiction.
Drugs is not the solution, but the solution is we. We are the one carrying the solution. These children have no problem, the youth have no problem, but they are left out.
Most of these young people sniff a cocktail of harmful drugs such as heroin, aviation fuel, and marijuana. The street uncles have now teamed up to help them get off the street and live a responsible life.
I started the art and craft. So I use the art, performing arts and visual arts to implement like programs to change, attitude change among vulnerable youth, children and all the people. That's why I see wherever I stay, there are people who are working.
Government figures show that about 20 children become homeless every day. But through this social interaction with the street uncles, many of them have been reunited with their families. The street uncles say they've reunited over 100 children with their parents. These former street children say they are grateful to have a new life.
He found me like a destitute, without any place of abode and nothing to eat. He taught me how to do art and craft.
He found me when I was still young on the street. It's now coming to 10 years. He helped me start a small business.
According to figures from Uganda Harm Reduction Network, a local non-government organization, close to 1 million people in Uganda use illicit drugs. Street uncles believe their approach is part of a bigger solution to reduce drug abuse in the country. Hilaria Yesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Your sport news is coming up after the break. Here's what you can expect. CAF delegation expected to visit Cameroon for last inspection ahead of the 2021 African Nations Championships.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Let's now take a look at the sport news. The interim president of the Confederation of African Football, Constant Amare, is due to visit Cameroon as the country prepares to host the 2021 edition of the African Nations Championship slated for January the 16th. Amari is expected in Cameroon for what will be the last CAF official inspection visit there. During the visit, Cameroon will showcase the different venues set to host the competition. The country's prime minister revealed earlier this week that the work done so far was satisfactory. The competition will be running from January the 16th to February the 7th of 2021. The first one-day international between South Africa and England that was scheduled for Newlands on Friday has been moved to Sunday after a player from the home team tested positive for COVID-19. Cricket South Africa say the latest round of tests conducted on Thursday resulted in an unnamed South African player returning a positive result, the third from within the camp during the 6-match limited over series. The teams had traveled to the stadium to prepare for the game, but it was officially called off an hour before the start. The player in question is set to be isolated from the group and a round of fresh tests likely conducted ahead of what is now the series opener in Paarl on Sunday. The postponement of the Tokyo Games until next year will incur Japanese organizers an additional $2.8 billion. That's according to the organizing committee, which addressed this on Friday. According to the organizers, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government is expected